In this video, we're going to look at issues around policing the right to freedom of peaceful assembly. Freedom of peaceful assembly is a fundamental human right enshrined in several international human rights instruments. It provides the foundation of a democratic society, enabling everyone to publicly express views, including both popular messages and those that might be dissenting and unpopular. States have an obligation to respect, protect, and fulfill this right. The role of the police in facilitating assemblies is paramount. Being the most visible manifestation of government authority, the police should demonstrate a state's commitment to upholding the rule of law and protecting fundamental human rights and freedoms. The police must facilitate all peaceful assemblies, including spontaneous and simultaneous assemblies, and also counter demonstrations. They must protect participants, allowing them to express their views freely within sight and sound of an intended audience. In doing so, the police need to act collaboratively and with transparency to ensure that they can be held accountable to the highest standards. OSCE ODIHR have compiled a comprehensive toolbox in the area of peaceful assemblies. Included in this toolbox are the Human Rights Handbook on Policing Assemblies and also the accompanying training course aimed at police commanders. Both the handbook and the training course seek to promote a change in police mentality. When approaching the policing of assemblies, rather than looking at assemblies as a nuisance or potentially dangerous, they emphasise the requirement to recognise assemblies as a manifestation of important human rights that the police must enable, protect and respect. In this section of your online assembly monitoring course, we will review the three elements of human rights compliant policing of assemblies. Firstly, the four key principles. We'll then look at command structures, and then we'll move on to issues around planning and decision making. In this section, we will examine the four principles that should guide the approach to policing of assemblies. These are facilitation, knowledge, communication, and differentiation. The four principles are interdependent and mutually reinforcing. They should inform all stages of planning, preparation, implementation, and debriefing of police operations to ensure that assemblies are able to take place in a peaceful manner. Each of the principles carry the same weight. However, notice how we've presented them on the graphic. This is to highlight that the key purpose of the police in relation to assemblies is to facilitate. Each of the other principles are utilised in order to help them to achieve that aim. The dictionary definition of facilitation provides a clear direction for the police in what it is that they're required to do. That definition being the process of making something possible or easier. It's the role of the police to help the assembly organisers and participants to exercise their right of freedom of peaceful assembly. In addition to the obligations of the state highlighted in the introduction section, there's also an important operational imperative for the police to seek to facilitate the efforts of organisers and participants. The underlying premise is to assume that most people who are part of an assembly will have peaceful intentions. The police need to identify participants' aims and objectives in order to consider tactics and approaches that enable the assembly organisers to achieve these legitimate goals. By making it easier for assemblies to achieve their goals, the police can not only lessen the likelihood of violence, but can also secure support and cooperation from participants in order to be able to respond effectively to any disturbances that may occur. If there is a substantive risk of unrest or violence, it's particularly important to clarify and inform organisers and participants why restrictions are necessary and to suggest alternative ways that the participants could use to achieve their goals. This helps to maintain the sense that the police role remains to facilitate the assembly. The police must, of course, be accountable for any restrictive actions that they might take. The police require to plan and prepare for assemblies so that they can facilitate them and make it possible for the organisers to achieve their goals. The basis of all good planning is good information and intelligence. This is a key aspect of the principle of knowledge. Information gathering by the police before an operation should be focused on increasing their understanding of groups that are expected to participate and their motivations. This includes their expectations in relation to the policing of the event, their history, including, for example, previous assemblies that they've organised, and also think about other matters that may have special symbolic meaning for them, that might include symbols or particular locations. Such knowledge enables the police to understand the interests and goals of the various groups so as to be able to facilitate their legitimate objectives. This knowledge also gives awareness of what kind of police action might be perceived as offensive or provocative by a group and may lead to conflict. Knowledge of the various groups that might be part of an assembly is an essential prerequisite to planning. It is important to be aware of their norms, values, and their sense of what's right and proper. This is useful in ensuring that frontline officers do not misinterpret simply boisterous behaviour as threatening or disorderly. A key issue to bear in mind is that while the police should reach out to organisers in order to build their knowledge, there is no obligation on the part of organisers or participants to engage with the police. The methods that the police might use to gather information must of course comply with the law and respect rights of privacy. Communication. Communication is of course a key element of the principle of knowledge. Engaging with organisers in the planning stages of operations enables the police to both hear the perspectives of those wishing to assemble and to provide them with clarity on the policing objectives and approaches. It's up to the police to adjust their communication style and approach when dealing with different audiences. There might be cultural issues that should be respected, or issues in relation to gender, disability, including also providing information in accessible forms. A particular consideration would be how to communicate with children and young people who might be involved in organising assemblies, and to do so in an age-appropriate manner. A policy of no surprises should guide communication, not just between the police and the organisers, but also with other stakeholders, including local communities, the media, observers. The sense of openness and transparency is a key element of the police being accountable for their actions. The police should aim to establish and maintain trust as a key preventative and de-escalation tactic. Communication should take place during all phases of an operation and is of particular importance when tensions begin to rise. If restrictions have to be imposed, it's important to inform people about the reasons, not least to avoid misunderstandings, but also to suggest alternatives. Experience shows the importance of respectful and calm police communication with participants in an assembly. This helps to avoid either the creation or escalation of conflicts. Police should utilise different ways to communicate their intentions, including direct engagement, through third parties, and through the media and social media. However, they also need to remain conscious of the messages that they might be sending through their behaviour or deployment. The uniforms that they wear say certain things, and also the equipment that they carry. Let's now turn to the principle of differentiation. You've heard me refer to organisers and to participants. However, an important risk factor during assemblies is the danger of regarding and treating all participants of a group as if they were the same. People with different backgrounds will be drawn to the same assemblies. Individual participants will have different motivations, and on occasions, some might have different inclinations towards disorder or violence. There are too many examples of how tensions have escalated and conflicts have arisen at assemblies due to the police intervening in an indiscriminate way. A group of people is never homogeneous. However, they may begin to behave in concert if they are treated or mistreated as a single entity. It's often said that one of the most impactful influences on the behaviour of a crowd is likely to be the behaviour of the police. The principle of differentiation requires that when the police do have to intervene to deal with individuals or small groups within an assembly, they do so in a way that doesn't lead to others being drawn into the conflict. Identifying, quickly dealing with, and isolating individuals that are intent on disturbing the peace from those that remain peaceful will help police to gain acceptance for their actions and support for their continued engagement with the assembly. Let's now move to the element around command structures. The police have a key role to play in ensuring that the right to peaceful assembly is protected and that assemblies are able to take place respecting the wishes of organisers as much as possible. The extent to which the police are involved can depend on the size or location of an assembly, whether it's likely to attract opposition or any potential for disorder. It is important to remember that the vast majority of assemblies are peaceful. Assemblies, especially when they are small in nature, will often pass off without the need for elaborate policing operations and may require only a very small number of officers to be on duty. In such cases, the requirement for a structured and tiered system of command might not be necessary. However, even in those circumstances, the principles that we cover in this section should still apply. A key principle is that the police must provide for a single, transparent chain of command so that it is always possible to determine which senior officer is ultimately responsible for the acts or omission of police personnel. As such, the command structure itself represents an important accountability mechanism. This is especially the case when operations involve larger numbers of personnel or include police officers from different agencies or different geographical areas. The unity of command principle envisions that each officer whose command or supervisory functions knows the following four things. 1. The person to whom they report. 2. Their role, responsibilities and objectives. 3. What resources are allocated to them and available to them. And number 4. The geographic or functional area that they're responsible for. There are often various and numerous ranks within a police organisation. However, ranks do not necessarily equate to command functions. The O'Dea Police Commander's Handbook advocates for a three-tiered system of command. This recognises that there are separate functions and responsibilities that primarily operate at three different levels. Because the system is based on three levels, it's often referred to as gold, silver and bronze. We'll now look at the distinct responsibilities of each level. But the idea of gold, silver and bronze will help you to visualise the hierarchy of command and responsibility. The strategic commander, often referred to as the gold commander, has ultimate responsibility and accountability for the entire operation. Their job is to define the aims of the operation. Sometimes we refer to this as the what. In other words, defining what it is that the police are seeking to achieve. This is likely to be communicated through a set of strategic intentions, things like facilitating the right to freedom of peaceful assembly, to ensuring the safety of participants, the wider public, and of course, of the police officers themselves. They might look to minimise disruption to everyday life, and quite often, importantly, they'll have something along the lines of to maintain confidence in the police service. The strategic intentions are communicated to the Silver Commander to inform the planning of the operation, but they should also be shared with external stakeholders and other partner agencies and also assembly organisers to demonstrate openness and transparency. As you can see, some of the strategic intentions impact on the others. The Gold Commander is therefore required to continually review and assess the progress of an operation, making necessary amendments and adjustments to the strategic intentions as necessary. As the name suggests, the role is strategic. The Gold Commander requires to be in a position to maintain an overall overview of the entire operation. Therefore, you're unlikely to see Gold Commanders on the ground. More often, they'll be in a command room, monitoring progress and engaging with the operational commander. The next level on our command graphic is the operational commander. This role is also likely to be performed by a relatively senior and experienced police officer, especially for larger or more complex operations and events. Operating at the middle level, we often refer to this role as the Silver Commander. The Silver Commander is a vital cog in the wheel, ensuring that the strategic intentions of the Gold Commander are achieved by the Bronze Commanders and the resources that are allocated to them. To do this, the operational commander has two primary functions. Firstly, they are responsible for developing a tactical plan. In other words, they work out how to achieve the strategic intentions, what resources are going to be needed, what tactics and equipment will be required, and where the officers are going to be deployed. All of this will be written down and retained as an important mechanism of accountability. The Silver Commander doesn't do this alone, of course. They'll be supported by a planning team, often involving with people with specialist skills and areas of expertise. Once the plan's developed, the Silver Commander will present it for approval to the Gold Commander to look at any necessary changes or amendments that might need to be made. Once approved, the Silver Commander will then ensure that the plan is properly briefed to those involved in its implementation. The other key function is that while the assembly is actually in progress, the Silver Commander has the overall responsibility and control of all deployed resources. Although this command system encourages that decision-making is delegated to the lowest appropriate level, the Silver Commander must be kept updated on significant occurrences or events so that the plan can be adjusted accordingly. In order to maintain effective control of the entire operation, it is likely that the Silver Commander will also not be on the ground. More likely, they again will be found in an operations room, being fed up-to-date information and intelligence and having access to CCTV and radio communications. Let's now turn to tactical commanders, or as they're often referred to, bronze commanders. They're responsible for the implementation of the plan. These are the commanders that you are likely to see on the ground. Ordinarily, they will be middle-ranking officers or frontline supervisors. They will have resources allocated to them that they are responsible for directing and supervising in accordance with the tactical plan. As a matter of good practice, a lot of police agencies ensure that bronze commanders are easily identifiable by wearing insignia or different coloured hats or epaulets. This assists with command and control, but it also means they can be quickly identified by assembly participants or members of the public as the senior officer present on the ground. Typically, a tactical commander will be responsible for a number of police officers within a defined geographic area. Often the police will divide up an area of operation into smaller, more manageable sectors, with a bronze commander in charge of each. Those commanders are then responsible for what happens in their area, ensuring that the Silver Commander is kept aware of significant developments. In this section, we have provided an overview of the requirement for the police to have a clear and transparent chain of command. While practices and structures of command might differ from one context to the next and from country to country, ODIHR advocate for a three-tiered system of command. It's a simple system that balances delegated, dynamic decision-making within the structure of an overall strategic plan. It defines specific roles and responsibilities. It facilitates communication between the various levels of command, and it makes it clear who's responsible and accountable. It is useful for assembly monitors to understand the command structure in order to understand who is responsible for the various actions of the police. It is particularly important that they should identify bronze commanders at an early stage. This gives the opportunity for direct liaison. Assembly monitors do not need the police's permission, but explaining their presence and role can be helpful and also mutually beneficial. Let's now look at planning and decision making. The third element of the approach to policing assemblies that is promoted within the ODIHR Police Commander's Handbook relates to a planning and decision-making model that can be adapted for gold commanders who are developing strategic intentions, for silver commanders who are developing a tactical plan, or for bronze commanders or frontline officers who are making key operational decisions. Note how the graphic demonstrates that this is a circular process. While all good planning and decision-making begins with good information, the model recognises that circumstances constantly change, and especially when the police take any action. For example, if the police were to impose a cordon, to issue an instruction to a crowd to move back, or a warning that they were about to use force, this is likely to have an impact on the behaviour of the participants. Therefore, the information that the police are now dealing with has changed, which could impact on the other considerations within the model. It is therefore important to continually monitor what is actually happening, to differentiate between the different actors present, and to assess whether particular interventions are having their intended effect. The purpose behind this model is to help bring structure and consistency to police planning and decision making. At each stage of the model, police officers are required to record their deliberations and their decisions. Thus, the model helps to create an audit trail of lifetime consideration and acts as an important accountability mechanism. Let's look now at each stage of the model. The first step is to examine and review all of the information and intelligence that is available. For example, the details of the location of the event, the number of participants expected to come, information on those that may be affected, like local communities or business owners, Also, we need to think about reviews of any other assemblies organised by the same group. This is an element of the knowledge principle, but will also draw upon the principle of communication, as knowledge tends to be gathered in an ongoing process through dialogue and communication with the assembly organisers and other stakeholders. While this is the first stage of the planning process, it's important to recognise the requirement to constantly update information intelligence. Circumstances change, and especially when dealing with large crowds. Events might develop in a way that wasn't envisaged or planned for. In order to be able to facilitate the rights of assembly participants and to differentiate between actors, police commanders must ensure processes deliver timely and accurate information. Let's move on to threat and risk assessment. This stage is about reviewing and making sense of all of the information and intelligence that's available in order to identify key risks to people's safety and the successful delivery of the policing operation. In large assemblies, the number of risks involved are potentially infinite, whereas there will be a limit on the number of resources that the police commander can deploy. Risk assessment is therefore about three things: identifying, prioritising, and mitigating the risks. Think about all of the potential risks to an assembly. This might include crushing if unexpectedly large numbers of people attend. It could be about the dangers caused by passing traffic, or how to respond in the case of a medical emergency. On some occasions, it could be about threats of violence aimed at the assembly by opposing factions. Police cannot possibly hope to eradicate all risks. Therefore, this second stage is about prioritising risk. In other words, they're working out which ones are most likely to occur and which ones are likely to have the most impact. Having identified the key risks, the police must then consider what actions they need to take in order to mitigate those risks. As with the first stage, risk assessment also needs to remain constantly under review to ensure that the police respond to new and emerging threats and dangers to the assembly. This process should always be recorded as an important element of accountability. Moving forward, we now start to consider the law and internal police policy. The police in all their actions are bound by the law. The first consideration for any police officer in effecting an arrest, in carrying out a search, or in using force needs to be, do I have a legal authority in law to do this? Does the law allow me to do this? When police officers are planning for an assembly, the same considerations must be in place. Therefore, having collected the information and intelligence and identified the key risks, the police should now be considering what action to take in order to mitigate those risks, and those actions must be guided by the law. Often domestic legal frameworks will incorporate key human rights considerations. The police therefore need to be fully conversant with the law as it applies to assemblies and the rights of participants. In addition to the legal framework, most police agencies will have detailed policy directives and guidelines on issues such as the use of force. These might impose additional considerations relating to the use of tactical options, for example, tear gas or water cannon. They might, for example, instruct or order that the use of such weapons require the explicit approval of a very senior officer. Let's now move on to tactical options. The United Nations Basic Principles on the Use of Force and Firearms set out the circumstances in which the police can use force. While these basic principles are guidelines as opposed to law, many states have incorporated the principles into domestic law. The UN principles are regarded as the authoritative international statement on the use of force by police, and are often referred to and relied on in various international courts, including, for example, the European Court of Human Rights. In addition to setting strict requirements regarding how police force is used, the basic principles also require that police organisations should have access to a wide range of equipment that would allow for a differentiated use of force. Differentiation is, of course, one of our key principles that should guide the approach to policing assemblies. What this means is that the police need to carefully consider the various risk factors that relate to assemblies. They should then develop tactical options that mitigate such risks. In doing so, they need to remain cognizant of the fact that an assembly is not a homogeneous group, and that even if there are participants within the assembly that are violent or disorderly, the tactics that the police deploy to deal with them should differentiate this group from the wider assembly. Even in dealing with violent people, the principle of differentiation applies to ensure that force is only used if it is necessary, and even then, the type of force is proportionate to both the threat being faced and the objectives that the police are trying to pursue. We will discuss in more detail the basic principles on the use of force in our next video lecture. The last stage in our model is action. Having worked through all of the steps, the police are now ready to take action. During the planning stage for a large assembly, this process might take many weeks, with the planning team constantly adjusting their approach to new information or changing risk assessments. However, the reason we call the process of planning the decision-making model is that it can be used in live and dynamic situations. Here, individual officers can quickly work through the steps in order to inform their live operational decisions about whether it's necessary to use force or if perhaps the appropriate tactic in a confrontation is to negotiate. Whatever the situation, once the police take action, there's a requirement to review and consider what impact this has had. Has the situation changed? Did the tactic work as intended? Has the objective been achieved? It is this process of review that helps to inform what happens next. In live operations, commanders should be constantly monitoring the impact of their tactical options. But the process of review doesn't simply finish with the end of the operation. The police should build in review and debrief processes, as these can provide important lessons learned, which will inform the planning for the next operation and also represent an important accountability mechanism. The purpose of this module was to explain the approaches that the police should adopt when engaging with assemblies. These are clearly set out in the ODIHR Handbook for Police Commanders. Primarily, the approach is built around the 4 key principles of facilitation, knowledge, communication, and differentiation. The police should adopt a single, clear, and transparent structure of command for assemblies. ODIHR recommend a 3-tier system, often referred to as gold, silver, and bronze. It's simple, effective, and acts as an important mechanism of accountability. Finally, in both planning and making operational decisions, the police should work to a consistent framework. All good planning is based on good information, from which the police can identify and mitigate key risks to people's safety. Their tactical options must be guided by the law and be both necessary and proportionate to the circumstances that they're dealing with. As an important accountability mechanism, all decisions must be recorded and supported by a clear rationale or justification.